Federal Way, Washington is a city that perfectly blends urban amenities with natural beauty. With its stunning views of Mount Rainier and the shimmering Puget Sound, it's a paradise for nature lovers. The city has a population of over 100,000 people, making it a bustling and diverse community. From shopping malls to movie theaters to sports centers, Federal Way has everything you need for a modern lifestyle. Despite its urban flair, the city has a warm and welcoming vibe that's hard to resist. However, in 1991, a tragic incident rocked the city to its core. The brutal murder of Sarah Yarborough sent shockwaves through the community, turning this idyllic place into a scene of horror. Sarah Yarborough was born on October 3, 1975, in the city of Federal Way, Washington. She was a young woman full of life and energy. Sarah had an infectious smile that could light up a room, and a kind heart that touched everyone she met. Sarah was an excellent student who excelled academically, but her true passion lay in the arts. She was a talented dancer, and music was her life. She exhibited her love for dance and music by joining the school's cheerleading team. She loved to sketch, paint, and create works of art that could express her innermost feelings. Sarah was a caring sister to her younger brother Andrew, and always made time for him, even when she was busy with her own interests. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to help someone in need. Her friends described her as a beautiful person inside and out, and her teachers adored her for her hard-working attitude and dedication to her studies. The day of the murder, in the cold morning of 14th December 1991, Sarah Yarborough woke up with excitement bubbling inside her. It was the day of the drill competition, and she had been looking forward to this day for weeks. She got dressed in her cheerleading outfit, put on some music, and started doing her hair. After getting ready, she got into her car and drove to Federal Way High School. As she pulled into the parking lot, she saw her teammates gathered around the bus, chatting and laughing. She parked her car and walked over to join them, feeling happy and excited. However, things took a dark turn soon after. On December 14, 1991, Sarah did not make it onto the school bus scheduled to leave Federal Way High School at 9:30 a.m. Her body was discovered by two boys who were cutting through the campus and saw a man pop out of the bushes and quickly walk away, tossing glances over his shoulder at them. As they passed by, they saw Sarah's body lying in a brushy area near the school's tennis courts, just 150 feet away from where her parked car was located. The boys ran back to one boy's house to alert his parents. One boy's father drove to the school and immediately called 911, leading to a large-scale police response. The police quickly realized that they were dealing with a horrific crime and immediately began gathering evidence from the crime scene. Detective Jim Doyon, the lead investigator in her murder case, felt a deep sense of responsibility to find justice for her. He led the investigation, and the King County Sheriff's Department took charge of the case. The police recovered DNA from the scene, including semen stains on Sarah's clothing and DNA from underneath her fingernails. However, the DNA did not match anyone in their database. Despite hundreds of individuals being swabbed, the case remained unsolved for many years. The police also examined Sarah's cell phone and vehicle, but found no significant information. Jody Sass, a DNA scientist at the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, worked tirelessly on the case, along with other investigators and scientists. The case had all the solvability factors that investigators could ask for, including a single-source male DNA profile and two eyewitnesses who provided a sketch and a detailed description of the suspect they had seen leaving the crime scene. The King County Sheriff's Department immediately started a search for the suspect and circulated 2 composite sketches of a possible suspect in the local media, hoping that someone would recognize him. The sketches depicted a man in his 20s at the time of the attack, with shoulder-length blonde hair. He was described as wearing a black trench coat and driving a 1970 tan Chevrolet Nova-style car. The police also shared details of the man's physical appearance and other information they had gathered from the scene. Despite the police's best efforts, the sketches did not lead to the identification of a suspect, and a name was never put to the sketch. The lack of a suspect meant that the case remained unsolved for many years, causing anguish to Sarah's family and friends. The case continued to receive media coverage, and the police continued to appeal for information, but no new leads emerged. The case went cold for 30 years. As Sarah's younger brother Andrew ran around the field, kicking the ball with his teammates, he had no idea that his world was about to shatter into a million pieces. His mind was consumed with the game, unaware that just a few miles away, his sister was taking her last breaths. As the game progressed, the police arrived at the field. Andrew's parents were pulled aside and given the news that would change their lives forever. Meanwhile, Andrew continued to play, completely unaware of the tragedy that had befallen his family. It was only later, when he returned home, that the full extent of the situation became clear. Sarah's absence felt like a gaping hole in the heart of the family. Andrew was left to grapple with the knowledge that his beloved sister was gone forever, taken from him by an unknown assailant in a senseless act of violence. After the case had lain cold for 30 years, the investigation started again upon finding a new twist. The connection between the Yarborough case and the Mayflower Fullers is a fascinating one, and it highlights the power of genetic genealogy in solving cold cases. The Fuller YSTR Surname Project was a group of descendants of Robert Fuller, who arrived in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1630s, and were relatives of the Mayflower Fullers. The project consisted of individuals who share the Fuller surname and had undergone YSTR testing, which analyzes short tandem repeats on the Y chromosome that are passed down from father to son. When identifiers began working on the Yarborough case in 2011, they searched the YSTR database and found a match between the killer's YSTR profile and members of the Fuller Project. This led investigators to William Fuller, a longtime friend of the Yarborough family, who had been in the area at the time of the murder. Fuller's daughter Elizabeth was also a classmate of Sarah's. William Fuller voluntarily gave a DNA sample, which was compared to the crime scene DNA. It was determined that he was not the killer, nor was he the father of the killer. However, his YSTR profile matched the Y profile from the crime scene DNA, indicating he was a paternal cousin of the killer. This was an important breakthrough in the case because it allowed authorities to trace the killer's genealogy back to the 1600s, even though the killer himself was still unknown. Investigators looked into other Fullers in the area, but the case went cold again. It wasn't until 2019 that the case saw a breakthrough when DNA evidence found at the scene was matched to a profile in the National Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS database. This match identified Patrick Leon Nicholas as a potential suspect in the case. CODIS is a large computer database that enables federal, state, and local forensic laboratories to exchange and compare DNA profiles electronically, linking violent crimes to each other and to known offenders. The DNA match was achieved using autosomal SNP testing, which analyzes single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, throughout an individual's genome to identify potential relatives. Patrick Neon Nicholas, the suspect in the 1991 murder of Sarah Yarborough, was a man with a dark past. Born in the early 1960s, Nicholas was in his late 20s at the time of the murder. He was described as having a lean, athletic build, standing at around 6 feet tall, with short brown hair and brown eyes. Nicholas had a troubled history long before he became a suspect in the Yarborough case. In 1986, he was arrested for possession of cocaine and received a sentence of 30 days in jail. He was arrested again in 1988, this time for the assault of a young girl in Benton County, Oregon. Nicholas approached the victim in her car, brandishing a knife and threatening to kill her. He then forced her to undress and walked her towards a river, where she managed to escape by swimming away. He was convicted of the crime and sentenced to 10 years in prison, though he was released after serving only 4 years. Despite his criminal history, Nicholas was never a suspect in the Yarborough case until advances in forensic genetic genealogy brought his DNA to the attention of detectives. Patrick Neon Nicholas was a man who had managed to escape suspicion for all those years. Despite a rap sheet that included arrests for assault and other crimes, Nicholas had never been on the radar of the investigators who had tirelessly worked the case. But DNA doesn't lie, and when forensic scientists examined the genetic material found at the crime scene and compared it to a sample from Nicholas, they found a match that was nothing short of remarkable. 13 alleles examined on both items were a perfect match. The odds of someone else having the same genetic profile was 1 in 120 quadrillion. It was a revelation that stunned everyone involved in the case. To build their case against Nicholas, detectives put him under surveillance following his every move. And it was during this surveillance that they were able to collect the evidence they needed. 2 discarded cigarette butts and a paper napkin that fell from Nicholas's pocket were all it took. The DNA on one of the cigarettes was a match for the DNA found on several items of Yarborough's clothing at the scene. It was a long time coming, but finally there was a break in the case. And it was all thanks to the groundbreaking technology of forensic genetic genealogy. Nicholas was finally arrested in January 2019, and his trial began in January 2020, nearly 30 years after the murder of Sarah Yarborough. The trial of Patrick Leon Nicholas for the murder of Sarah Yarborough was a tense and emotional affair. Throughout the proceedings, the prosecution presented a compelling case against Nicholas, linking him to the crime through strong forensic evidence. Expert witnesses testified that DNA samples taken from Yarborough's clothing and body matched Nicholas's DNA, which had been collected from cigarette butts and a napkin left behind by Nicholas while he was under surveillance. This evidence proved to be crucial in the case against Nicholas. Furthermore, prosecutors argued that Nicholas had assaulted Yarborough before strangling her to death. They also presented testimony from witnesses who claimed to have seen Nicholas near the school on the day of the murder.
And then all of a sudden Adam said, "There's a girl in the bushes." And I turned and looked, and that's when I saw Sarah's body. Turned back, looked at him. He was now standing close. There was a vehicle parked right around the corner where the parking lot is. Standing right next to that vehicle, grabbed Adam and said, "Run," ran back to my house.
This testimony, combined with the DNA evidence, made a strong case against Nicholas. In response, Nicholas's defense team tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, especially the reliability of DNA testing. They also argued that there were other potential suspects who should have been investigated more thoroughly, but who were overlooked by investigators. However, the prosecution was able to refute those claims and maintain their case against Nicholas. During the trial, Yarborough's mother, Laura, emotionally testified about the moment when she learned that her daughter's body had been found. Her mother's testimony brought back painful memories for those in the courtroom, including friends from the Federal Way High School class of 1993 who packed the room. One of Sarah's friends, Shannon Grant, testified about driving by the school and seeing police caution tape after the murder. The trial was also a reminder of the passage of time, as many of the original detectives on the case had retired or passed away, and some witnesses had moved away. One of the officers who initially responded to the scene in 1991 also testified during the trial, highlighting the longevity and complexity of the case. The trial was a highly emotional affair for Yarborough's family and friends. They were present throughout the proceedings, listening to testimony about the brutal murder of their loved one. Emotions ran high as they waited for justice to be served after more than 3 decades of waiting. The trial lasted several weeks, during which time the jury heard from dozens of witnesses and experts. The proceedings were meticulous and thorough, with each piece of evidence and testimony carefully examined. In the end, the jury found Patrick Neon Nicholas guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
We, the jury, find the defendant Patrick Leon Nicholas guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
The verdict brought closure to Yarborough's family and friends, who had waited more than 3 decades for justice to be served. While the trial was a difficult and emotional experience, they were finally able to see the person responsible for their loved one's death brought to justice. The trial served as a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it will eventually be served. The comments made by the mother and friends of Sarah Yarborough are a testament to the lasting impact of her murder on their lives. For Laura Yarborough, the case had been a constant weight on her and her family's minds. The news of the arrest was both a relief and a trigger, bringing back all the emotions of 1991. The thought of what Sarah could have accomplished in her life also added to their sorrow. Despite their grief, they were united in their determination to see justice served for their loved one. Laura Yarborough said that although they continued with their lives, the case was always at the back of their minds as unfinished business. She expressed that living with this for 28 years had been exhausting, and if the case had never been solved, it would have cast a shadow over their lives for the rest of their time.